And if we're doing the math here, it is now August 2001. So I go and check myself in and things are moving along. There's a piano. So girl, even the mental health was going great. I could play the piano every day. This is going fantastic. I mean, really, like Prin's life is doing well. So I always say this is like the strangest pivot, but 9/11 happened.
Welcome back to Second Verse, the podcast for independent artists who are returning to music or finally stepping fully into it, no matter what life has thrown in the way. I'm Becky Boyland, singer-songwriter, music producer, and your host. Today's guest started playing piano by ear at 3 years old. By 15, she was getting paid to perform. By 22, she was in a psychiatric hospital in Manhattan on September 11th, 2001. And that's just the beginning. Prin is a music producer, author, and educator based in New Jersey. Her work sits at the intersection of wellness and the arts through programs, workshops, and performance experiences that support integrative health. She's also now an empowered female music producer who turned grief, injury, and more than one derailed comeback into an entire creative identity. This is a story about what it looks like when music refuses to let you go, and what happens when you finally stop fighting it. Let's get into it. Welcome, Prin. Thank you so much for being here today on Second Verse.
Hello, how are you?
I'm so excited to have you here and to get into your story, because that's what's so fascinating to me is all the artist stories that I get to hear. And like most, you started off very early. Tell me about when you first fell in love with music as a kid.
I began playing the piano when I was 3. So I think I have always thought in piano, and it's always been a part of who I am. It took a few years before I started taking lessons, and then eventually I started working as a musician when I was 15. So I was very lucky. I was born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey. So I was very close to New York City and always had access to the arts and culture and music and live music and venues and just that support of the local art. So I would say very early on, even before I started working and getting paid as a musician, I was playing and doing a lot of things, even academically, in school settings or community settings. So it's always been a part of who I am, for sure.
That's awesome. I got into music not quite that early, but my first instrument was trumpet when I was 9. And
oh, nice.
It's always just so great to have that desire to play very early on. And I knew that as soon as I could get my hands on an instrument, it was going to be an amazing thing. So what kinds of work were you doing as an artist when you were just 15?
So as a piano player, my first job was in liturgical music, like in church. It was like my first opportunity. And I had been playing through my school. I went to an all-girls private school in Jersey City. And I don't know I was pretty shy. I had a lot of stage fright when I was actually a kid. So maybe when I started to take lessons, I was 9-ish. Even though I'd been playing since I was a little kid, I didn't like playing in front of people. And my parents tended to, like push me to play, and maybe like somebody's birthday, all the usual, your kid plays an instrument, so let's show them off scenarios. But I didn't like it. And when I went to high school, I had she was actually the dean of students at the time. And she caught me at lunch practicing on the baby grand of the school. And I used to do that all the time. And this was maybe now sophomore year, right, of high school. And everyone that I was friends with knew I played, and people knew that I went and played the piano, but I didn't go to any of the talent shows. I refused to do any of the stuff. And she hid behind the curtains of the stage. And actually, fast forward, later on in life, I had to do a speech at that school, and she was still working there, and I made sure to give her a nod because it was a very defining moment. She approached me and was like, "You're not signed up for whatever it was, this event that was happening that was some sort of talent show." I was like, "Yeah, I don't play in front of people." And then she paused to me and she was like, "Well, how long have you been playing?" So I give her my whole spiel. I've been playing since I was 3, yada, yada, yada. She's like, "Well, then I guess you must not be much of a player then." And I was like, well, I mean, And she had just been hearing me and she was just complimenting me. So, but she knew me because she knew I was a very, very motivated student in other areas of my life. And I was probably really competitive too. So when she said that, I was just like, well, no, I mean, fine, I'll sign up for the thing. And I think I went back to my teacher that week and I was like, this lady like made it sound like I didn't know how to play. I was all mad about it. And I think I played like New York, New York or something like that. For that talent show. But from that point, I got asked to play all the time. So it was in that small environment. So I felt okay. So I was playing for programs, workshops. Oh, there's a guest coming and Prin's going to play an introduction. It was like I had no problem playing in front of my all girls school community. And then one day we had a mass and I was playing for the masses. And that priest who came happened to know that they were looking for a piano player for this church. And he was just really impressed with me at that age. And then I got the job and that was how I started. So I started as a liturgical instrumentalist and I learned so much so quickly. But from that, I started to play weddings. I started to play retreats. I started to play local events, private dinner parties. So by the time I went to college, I was gigging on a regular basis, which was a big blessing. I know I'm very lucky that I had that opportunity for sure. So
that's really amazing. And I love that story that she just knew how to call you out and
she knew how to push my buttons.
What a great catalyst. So then you went on to college and share kind of what happened after that.
So I went to Fordham University in the Bronx. So I didn't go far, but, I stayed, I dormed there and everything. And it was a very positive experience because I was in New York City. So, Fordham has two campuses. So it has the Bronx campus and the Lincoln Center campus. So I was constantly in the Lincoln Center area. And because I was a Fordham student and I was in New York City, I had access to discounts to all the things. So, I got to see the opera for the first time and I got to be in shows all the time. And I started to get gigs through Fordham where it was interesting because I eventually became the director of their folk choir by the time I was like a junior and senior. But those first 2 years, there were obviously other people ahead of me that were, musicians themselves. And somewhere along the way, I met a nice young man who was the current director at the time of the folk choir. And he knew I could play, but he played and he was not giving up the piano. So he was just like, that's nice that you play, but this is my job. So at some point I kept bothering him, because I was a freshman and I really wanted to play because I'd been playing, all this time. And I was like, I didn't have any gigs. I was in a different location now. So I couldn't go to my old gigs. It was like hard for me to get work because I had relocated to the Bronx. And he started to get me work. So he started to get me gigs that he couldn't do. He started to get me, just cocktail hour gigs, events that were happening. I ended up playing even for US military events in Midtown. I was, playing at the Botanical Gardens. It was really great. And so I very quickly was doing really well in college as a musician. So much so that I almost was like, maybe I should not finish college and pursue this. But I decided to stay in college and that was a good decision. And a lot of things in life sort of ended up becoming detours shortly after college. So it was a good choice that I did stay and finished my degree. But yeah, college in New York City was a great place and time to be as a musician for sure. I helped people get ready for their Broadway auditions. I was playing piano all the time. I was composing all the time. It was great. It was good. It was good times.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Such a great city. I've been a few times. I haven't been a ton of times, but I can only imagine, how amazing that all those opportunities and all those other musicians to be able to collaborate with and just be part of each other's orbits. That's really awesome.
That's what it is. It's really, I even now, I live in New Jersey and I live in the suburbs, but New York City is still my musical space, I guess. And whenever I do go, there's a certain support system in New York City with local artistry, especially songwriters, that even if it's an open mic or it's a songwriter circle, or it's just, one of those small songwriter is doing a show, there just seems to be so much interest in supporting that, even if you don't know who the person is. You just go out and, you don't know who is on the ticket, but you're just going to go out and support. And I found that to be a staple of my musical journey, because that ended up, that grassroots approach of supporting the arts and supporting people who play instruments became a big part of, for the rest of my career, what I found as a priority. And of course, I work with electronic music and I do music production. So it wasn't a slight to anything that was technological at the time. But in those years when I was in college, I was very, very much a purist about instruments and wanting people to play music live. I didn't play digital pianos or keyboards. I only played if there was a piano. I was very strict about that rule. But, as you can imagine, that's a little obnoxious too. So I was still a little green, a little wet behind the ears. But, I became a little more flexible. But in those years, I was very particular about making sure we were supporting real musicians, the instrumentalists, the people who play. So what a time. What a time.
Yes, I think we all have those seasons. And then we find out how easy it is to just create everything digitally.
Yes. Then we get over ourselves a little. And then we're like,
But I think that's an amazing thing too about New York and other areas that are known for, there are so many artists, and whether it's Nashville or Chicago or LA. And so the misconception is that there are the big fish and then there's everybody else. And everybody's aspiring. But what's so important about recognizing that there's so much support. And that's the way most artist communities are. It's like, let's just bolster everybody and be there. And I think that that's helpful for people to know, especially if they've been afraid of getting out there and trying to get themselves in front of audiences. And people are genuinely wanting to support independent artists. So that's really exciting.
It is. And I agree. I think that even in that time, and, this will probably segue into how after me, at this point, I'm making it sound like everything was fantastic. So what the heck happened that I didn't pursue music at that time? But I do think that even in that context, our own insecurities and our own fears of putting our music out there and putting our expressions or creative expressions for other people to consume can be scary. And I think because I was so young when I started working, I was very confident, I think, when I had like that steady job of gigging. But once it turned into me writing original work and releasing it or trying to make demos or having to perform it or having people know that what they were listening to was my original work, that gave me a lot of anxiety. And even though I was fully supported and had a support system and had a lot of connections too at the time, because this is like late 90s, early 2000s, and there was not a lot of excuses for me to say like, oh, I don't know who to contact or anything like that. It wasn't that. I just think I just had a lot of fears for my original music. I was very protective about it. And eventually then life happened. and then that's where we'll get to next, I'm sure.
Yeah.
in our conversation.
Absolutely. So talk about what you call your first pivot, really.
Yeah, I've had a couple. So the first main pivot, it did happen right after I graduated college. So I graduated in May 2001, and I did struggle with my mental health at that time. I had already been diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2 a couple years prior. And I wasn't medicated. I wasn't doing anything. I didn't have health insurance. There was a lot, I'm a musician, so I didn't have health insurance. And I also didn't have the relationship with my family or my parents at the time that would have been able to provide that support for me then. So my senior year, I made a choice of, okay, I need to do something because I need some type of help. And so I knew I wasn't going to pursue grad school or anything like that. I had just gotten a job. My first job teaching music was my senior year. It actually came as a result of a lot of the work that I did. I was recommended to teach music at a school in Manhattan, which is, by the way, I haven't even graduated yet. So again, I have I'm making it sound like everything was fantastic. Yes. So I really, have no excuse. So I was juggling senior year and teaching. And it worked out because when you're a senior, you can like rearrange your schedule pretty well and do evening classes and weekends and stuff like that. So I was doing really well. but my mental health just wasn't 100% there. Like I was definitely struggling. I had a lot of substance abuse issues at the time that were getting worse to the point where I had friends who were now concerned for my well-being. There were more incidents that were taking place where I was definitely the highs and lows of being a bipolar person. I was a rapid cycler too. So it was very, very inconsistent, results. Fordham was the best place for that to happen. And I've always been very positive about my experience at Fordham because the professors there and the staff there, the people who knew me there, the adults, I was an adult, but the grown-ups were the real grown-ups were so supportive and understanding and really trying to get me to pursue the best interest of my health. And I think that eventually that landed me in the counseling center, and that specific doctor knew that she didn't have the resources for what I needed, but she kept referring me to different case studies and different things that I could do for free to get help. And eventually that landed me in the New York State Psychiatric Institute because I got approved to be a case study the August after I graduated. So I spent all summer working and deciding if I really wanted to do this because it was an inpatient program, but it was the only way I was going to get medication. It was the only way I was going to get counseling, and all of it for free. So, it's like, hey, you have to be here for about 30-day minimum, depending on how long the procedures and everything and the treatments were going to be. And so I agreed, and I was in the hospital still. And I've always hesitated, because that day is not about me. And that day is a separate type of tragedy that has nothing to do with my story. But unfortunately, it is a huge part of my story as a person. And in particular, because in the context of that day, if you're in a hospital in New York City, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. Like there's chaos. No one knows if we're evacuating. Reports are coming in a very, like anyone who was alive that day sort of understands it from a news standpoint. But like if you are in Manhattan, which I was, and I was like right by the GWB. So because it was a bridge, it was considered a potential target. Like we didn't know for a few hours what the status was going to be. It was a very disturbing day. And I just remember I was sitting in like the common room, and, there's like my roommate who had a different mental health, concern, sitting crying, and the doctors and nurses at that day, they were not doctors and nurses that day. They were all just people who were stuck in a building together with us. Like we were just not really sure what was going on. And I remember watching the towers fall. And when the second tower fell, I remember being the person that told this one head doctor, he had just popped in, and I let him know that the second tower fell. And we were the two people who hadn't been crying yet. So, but at that moment, like that was when we both, cracked. and for me, that day was life-changing. I mean, there's just no other cliche way to describe it, but it was life-changing. Because at that point, I became very dedicated to my mental health and surviving and being grateful for my life, for the things that I do have, for all the things I listed in this conversation prior to my life that I could be grateful for and happy for. And even though I was dealing with depression and, manic tendencies, I wanted to get better and I wanted to be all in for this. So I did. And so that took about 2 years of doing absolutely nothing except for, I had the outpatient program that obviously was part of this whole thing. And I was doing group work and individual counseling. I had 2 separate counselors. I had to see the doctor and then the social worker. And then I had the group. And then it was a lot. It was very time consuming. And I was still working as a music teacher because it all timed out. I guess like it worked out that I was able to come back and start the school year a little late, and it wasn't an issue. But yeah, and it was a post 9/11 world in New York City. So I think even the way I wrote music changed, and I started to write music, but I wasn't releasing any of it. I wasn't performing. About a year after, less than a year actually, I hurt my back, and I ended up walking with a cane for like 2 years. And that stopped me from playing. Doctor's orders, like I couldn't sit in that position for more than 20 minutes at a time. So I went from being able to play 2-3 hour shows to I can only play for 20 minutes a day. So that was it. That was it. That was the end of my music career. you know, that was it. And I started looking for work using my degree. I had double majored in psychology and English, actually, because I didn't pursue music since I had been working as a musician. I chose a different major, which actually worked out for me. That was a good decision because I ended up doing a lot of per diem work with adults with developmental disabilities. And so I taught a lot of independent living skills and recreational skills. And so I was able to kind of use my music in conjunction with social services and mental health work, which was nice. But I was officially done. Like now music was just what I do on the side. And I was now working full time in counseling. And then eventually I worked full time in education. So I went back more into education. I started to do administration. So I was the director of admissions at the high school that I went to. Oh, wow. So I ended up becoming their director of admissions. And then I went to higher ed and I stayed there for about 8 years. And I was good at my job. I actually really enjoyed working in admissions and counseling, and I did a lot of adult admissions. So, adults who were coming back to finish their degrees. And that was what I did. I published a book along the way. I would go to the recording studio for fun and record demos, but zero intentions. A friend would have a wedding. I would play the piano, or, every once in a blue moon, somebody would ask me to like, hey, do you still play for like a dinner party or something? Yeah, sure. But I was done gigging. I had stopped gigging for years, which was sad when I look back on it because it was very like, I can't sit at the piano. I can't walk. Everything sucks. All right. So, and I was just very fortunate to have a job and have health insurance and be healthy. And I looked at it from that lens for I guess a decade. It was sort of like, hey, I had a great heyday and I guess it wasn't in the cards for me. And I moved on. So that was the first. That was the first hiatus.
We'll be back with more after this break. Hey, I'd like to share with you something really special I'm working on. I bet you've been sitting on songs, maybe for years. You know how to write, but finishing them, that part feels out of reach. I get it. I've been there. And I built She Produces Music because I believe women don't need to wait for someone else to bring their music to life. It's a coaching program for female songwriters who are ready to learn music production in Ableton Live and finally hear what their songs are actually supposed to sound like. Find out if it's right for you at sheproducesmusic.com. It's amazing how so much time can go by and we can sort of be like, well, that's okay. That was for a season. Yeah. And yet that music just sticks around and it keeps popping its head up every once in a while until it finally says, hey, this is your time. Now is the time.
Sure. Well, it did do that. And you're right. It goes by very quickly. Like for me, it was shocking how much time went from when I was at that New York State Psychiatric Institute, 9/11, those months, those 2 years of focusing on myself and my mental health and everything really, I was doing so much better. So there was this part of me that thought, maybe it just wasn't aligned, that lifestyle and my mental health needs. So I justified a lot of it and just let it go. It was sort of like, hey, it didn't happen and I'm not going to be mad about it because I'm in a better place now, like physically, mentally, emotionally. So that's how I viewed it. But then, I met my husband and I got married. And once we had a family going and my life was very stable at that point, I have to say there was this like hankering of the music that started to happen because now I was in a place where, well, I still have to work and I can still work from home. And I was doing a lot of freelancing as a writer. After I left music, I just dove in all the way with my writing. So I was I was a pretty successful freelance writer while I was working full time. Like I'd work full time and then I'd go meet with clients and stuff. And I did a lot of SEO and business writing and blog writing, article writing, things like that, a lot of ghost writing. So that was a great side gig. And that's where my attention went. So much so that I used to say I write for a living so I can live to play. Because I looked at playing the piano as just, that's what I love to do, but I don't need to make money doing it. So poetic.
Yes, we all say that at some point, don't we?
We all say that at some point, yeah. I mean, exactly. So that was my way of making it sound romantic. Like, I'm just an artist. I don't need to make money with the piano, And so I worked at Berkeley College at this point, and I decided that I was going to quit. I had my youngest, and I was commuting from my home to my mom's to drop her off, to then go get our oldest at the school. And she was in New York, and I was in the car 4 or 5 hours a day with New Jersey, New York traffic. And that made zero sense. Mind you, my husband himself, he also obviously did driving, but it was just that the logistics of my schedule, which technically was more flexible than his, resulted in me being the one that needed to do most of this driving around. And I was like, this I can't do. Like, whatever this is not what I want to do for the next 10, 15 years until I find the next, step in my career. Like, no. And I literally left in my peak. I gave them 3 months notice because I had a fantastic relationship in the college atmosphere. And I loved doing what I did. I still keep in touch with most of those people. There was like zero issues. It was just like, this isn't what I want to do with my life. Like, I love what I'm doing. I love that I've been here and I've been, able to be here for years, but this is not, I don't see this in my life in the next few decades. And so, I gave him 3 months notice. And on my last day, I remember one of my superiors came down and he's like, I think we all thought you were bluffing. Like, we all were like, is she really going to leave? I'm like, I don't know why you thought I was bluffing, but okay. So I left. And then the plan was to do music and writing from home. So I was all excited. Yay, we're going to go back. We're going to dust off those songs. We're going to focus. We're going to go more full time on the freelance writing. And the day after my health insurance from my job ran out, I got hit by a car. Oh. And I got permanent nerve damage in my left hand.
Oh, man.
So now I'm like, okay, we're just going to keep typing and writing because that we can do. And we're just going to have to figure out what the plan B is, because obviously I needed months to go. I was occupational therapy. I mean, I got a lot of the, abilities back in my left hand, but my left hand was almost what defined me as a piano player. I had a really, really good rhythmic left hand. And now I never got that back. There's a certain limitation to how reliable my left hand is. And for anyone who's a musician, instrumentalist, an injury to the body part that you use for your instrument is exactly as devastating as you can imagine is going to be. Yeah. If not worse. I could not believe this happened to me. It was the worst timing because I had just quit my career and I was like, this is insane. This is insane. You've got to be kidding me. And how long it took to get, the playing ability back without it hurting. And it was a lot of pain too. And I worked through it and I dedicated myself to at least being able to play again. And by 2013, so that was 2012, right? Yes. That was January of 2012. And so mid 2013, I was like, we're going to start gigging again. I don't know how, but we're just going to start gigging. So I went from whatever year it was, 2001 to 2013 without any gigs. And I started to play a few weddings. I started to play at the bitter end. I started to go back into the city. And I mean, frankly, I went to Nashville a few times. I started to do that for a few years. And eventually I released my first album in 2016. So that's how long it took for me to release my music. But you know, that monkey wrench of the hand made me focus on songwriting. I was like, you know what? I'm a songwriter. And so it got me into the studio, and I was able to let go of me being the only person that needed to be involved in the sound. So I was able to have a band, and I was able to, you know, listen to suggestions about things that I could do differently with the piano or with the keyboard or synthesizer, things like that. So it allowed me to acknowledge that I needed help too. Like I couldn't do it by myself. So that's how I ended up with my first album finally in my 30s, you know, so there you go.
That's totally true, though, when you do have all of a sudden a limitation you did not expect, that it makes you pivot to some other things. And I found that for myself as well. I've talked about it here on the podcast. I lost my voice after a spine surgery, which I think we're going to be talking about actually.
We're going to get there soon.
Yes. And I couldn't talk really above a whisper for 6 weeks, and it took me a good solid 2 years to get my vocals back to where I wanted them to be. But I started making instrumentals in the meantime, as soon as I could actually physically sit in a chair in the studio. And it just gave me a different box of crayons to play with. And so now that's something that I can do in addition to writing the lyrical songs that I do. So yeah, sometimes that thing that we think is just going to end it all is the thing that actually gives us the catalyst for the next part of the journey.
The motivation, for sure. And yes, you just hinted at, because, you know, I feel like I need to keep, you know, setting it up like, oh, things are working out. No. No.
You should say, just you wait.
Just you hang on there. So I have the album. I've been recording it like 2014, 2015. You know, 2015, I locked in, got it done, started getting it mixed, all the stuff. You know, put in a lot of money into it. I worked with amazing people on it. I had Doug Yole as a drummer, and he's, you know, on tour with like a variety of artists even to this day. I had Mark Plotty on it. He worked with David Bowie. I mean, I had like really solid musicians working on this album. And the release was in July of 2016. And I had a show that weekend at the bitter end. And I was all excited, all prepped to go. And I get rear-ended the day before the show. Okay. So as you can see, yeah, I don't know. It's like every time there was everything lining up with my music, something stupid like would happen like that. And this one though was very upsetting because I still ended up having to do the show, and I was in a lot of pain, and it derailed any and all promotion. I got hit by a car, and then 6 months later, I got sideswiped on a highway. So I was injured, and then I was injured again. So I had multiple issues in my neck and my upper back. I had all the things that you usually get to do. You know, you have to see a doctor, and then of course you have to deal with the fabulous insurance company wondering why you would need any type of treatment for discs being damaged. And so it was just such a stressful time. And I was really trying hard to focus on my music, but that was really, really hard to do. I was in so much pain. I was taking painkillers, muscle relaxers. I had to make sure I was navigating my substance abuse, you know, tendencies with this treatment. So my doctors were just very on top of me. I was very, very hands-on with the whole process. And eventually I had to have surgery for 2 disc replacement in 2019. Now, as you described, you know, if they cut you through here, that whole section of your body, the muscles, everything, the tissues, there's inflammation. The singing needs a lot of time to heal. Mm-hmm. So I became, you know, very self-conscious of like, okay, my voice is not 100% reliable right now. Like I think I'm singing this pitch and I'm not. So I started taking some online voice lessons. Like I started to do some recuperation once I started to feel better from the surgery. And then the pandemic happens. So that time is actually what prompted me, because at this point now I'm fed up. I'm like, you know what? This is ridiculous because now we've got a pandemic and I can't go anywhere, do anything, record anywhere, nothing. I can't even gig if I wanted to. So that's how I got into music production. I used that time in 2020 to enroll in a few programs, and I ended up learning how to use Logic and do music productions on my own. And then before I knew it, I was doing not just for myself, but I was doing it for other people as well. And that also led to me focusing on instrumentals a lot more because I was capable of creating the sonic version of an idea a lot faster on my own than when I used to have to go into the city and go in person and record. So, I mean, all bad things that I have obviously gone through have all seemed to line up to this point in the last few years where I have my business and I do wellness and the arts, and I'm still, an educator in music, but I'm able to create music and produce it and help other people do their demos and do collaborations. And having that independence, also as a woman, having learned music production and working with other women who are artists and singers and who may not necessarily do music production themselves. You mentioned that as well. Like it's so nice to be able to provide that support for someone who may be at a place in life where I was in the past. And I've always enjoyed that. I've worked with a variety of people, different age groups, and I'm always fascinated by just the ability for people to create together, and doing collaborations is definitely, a blessing as well. So yeah, and I've been able to release music, which has been nice. I could give you another monkey wrench because there is one. Just because I feel like your listeners at this point are like, this is not even like a second verse. It's not even it's like the third, fourth, fifth. Yeah. So in 2021, because of the pandemic, I had lots of time at home. So I was super creative. I wrote a couple books in that time frame, and I wrote music, and I was getting ready to release the book. And later I had some artwork that went with it. So, my brother passed away suddenly after having COVID. So I put a pause on some of those releases, and I wrote an album the month right after he passed away. And it's called The Calm Principles. That was actually the catalyst for me doing a lot of the sound healing and ambient instrumentals. It's just how I let it out. I was grieving, and it was the way that I was able to process that grief. And that entire album ended up being done. So I said, oh, you know what, this is going to become a project then. And so I postponed the book. I updated the book, included, the grief and loss of my brother in it. And then that became a project for about a year or so, where I had the album, the book, and the artwork. And I did a couple art galleries and things like that. And I think from there, I found so much healing in music, and I was able to share that with other people that it kind of became more my branding. And I guess I'm sticking with that. I'm sticking with wellness and the arts, and just how creative expressions help us process emotions and life hardships and losses. And I think I could definitely say I feel like my life is a good example of how that is true, because I definitely used the arts to get through a lot. But yeah, it's also something I'm really passionate about sharing with other people. Like I love, helping people see how their creative expression can help them get through hard times. So
that's so
there you go.
And that's such an amazing journey. And at any one of those moments along the way, I'm sure you're like, oh, I just can't, everything feels so heavy. And then the opportunity to see things come together and coalesce and reflect on it is just so priceless. And it makes such a difference, really, because that story would have been so different if you had just continued playing piano in New York and life had gone on, and it could have been amazing, but it would have been a different story. That's for sure.
And I've reflected on that quite a bit, because I'm 46. So, I'm not super old and I'm not super young, right? So I'm middle-aged, and I always look at the what ifs of the timing of how things occurred, because I don't know what to tell you. Like if I had not gotten the mental health care I needed at that time, I mean, a lot of other options could have occurred, right? Like, I mean, I really wasn't in a good place. And while that paired with the accident that I had with my back where I couldn't walk kind of put a pause on the piano playing. I was very consumed as a piano player. Music was my life. This is what I did all the time and in my free time. And I couldn't do it anymore. So I was able to get better. I don't know if that would have happened if I had been like laser focused on making my music career occur. And I never want to discourage someone. Like I speak to sometimes younger people, you know, and I do feel that your mental health is super important. It doesn't matter what age you are. But when you're young, you don't always realize how bad your mental health is because like you're physically sometimes stronger. Like, you know, you've got the energy, you've got the, you know, you're scrappy, you know, you're willing to like go through stuff. And I agree. I feel like when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you know, I thought I was living my best life. Like I made it sound like I was, right? I mean, and in real time, you know, I was thin and I was trendy and I was going out and I was having a great time. So it's hard to see your life as unstable, you know, when you're in it, because it seems normal, especially in creatives. I think when we're artistically inclined people, we tend to accept a certain level of instability with like, oh, you know, we're a little quirky or we're a little this or that. But there's a point where you do just have to take care of yourself. Your mental health is your health. Like if you have a blood pressure issue or if you got diagnosed with a disease or a chronic illness, you would take care of it. But we have a tendency not to jump on our mental health. And we tend to let it simmer around for a bit. And for me, that was not a good choice because I had been dealing with, you know, some issues since childhood. So it was great that I had music as an outlet, but in the end, I had to go through that whole journey to come back to it because I needed to exist in order to be able to make music. And I can't guarantee I would still exist if I hadn't done that detour. So that may be a little morbid, but I feel like it's accurate. So I've always thought that as much as I'm like, oh, you know, I could have done this, or I could have worked with this person, or oh gosh, I was backstage with so and so and so and so, and you know, that was a long time ago now, but it's okay, and I still have some very good friendships and colleagues and connections over the years, and I feel that I never toured, you know, I never did any of those things because I didn't think they were aligned with like my best interest. And I found a path for myself that worked with the life that I have been able to build, where, you know, I'm married and I have a family and I have a home and I have a dog and a cat. And, you know, yeah, I that's important to me now. So I also have to find balance for my creative career in that. Like that's the structure that I live. So I'm not going to mess up my life so that I can then pursue a music career, but they both have to fit with each other. So it's taken a long time.
But it's beautiful. It's beautiful that way. And I think it's also, like you said, you know, reflecting back and thinking of our coulda, woulda, shouldas. But the truth is that none of those things would pan out the way that we think that they would have, because there's really only one way to get to where we currently are now. So looking back, all the things that we wish hadn't happened, or, you know, none of that's a healthy enterprise really to do, because it changes the equation and that we're not
for sure
who we are. Yeah.
Yeah. And even today, when I do wellness in the arts programs, which is like, you know, part of my educational umbrella for my business, and I work with young people and I work with adults and I work with creatives, sometimes not creatives. The reason I do wellness in the arts is because I feel that we all have an ability to be creatively expressive. And of course, some of us are artists. And of course, some of us may have a musical talent or have been trained or have a slightly better skill set for the arts. But it's the expression that is important. And even some of the most classic, amazing pieces of work throughout history are not perfect. So I think sometimes as artists, we're seeking like this polished, perfect, you know, okay, I can't release it until it sounds the way I hear it in my head. And we get very precious about it. And I've definitely done that. But now I think I've also learned to look at that whole past of my story and say, a lot of the songs that I wrote, a lot of the music that I write today, they've taken a long journey to get out into the world, so they deserve to be out in the world. So even if I can make them better one day, it's okay, you know. And I have a couple songs like that. I just had this conversation with someone I collaborated with, and I said, I think we need to redo our song. It's good. I said, I feel like we can do better. So we had released it a few years ago, and she's on board, you know, and we're excited about it. And I think that's the right attitude to have. I think that sometimes there's songs that I have revisited in the past. I'm like, I don't know why I haven't released this. This is pretty good. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to like record it and give it a proper mix, and it's time for it to go out. But we tend to be our worst critics, and time goes by. And before you know it, you haven't released anything until you're in your 30s, like me, even though you've been working since you were 15. And I find that to be the fascinating, like that's the lesson there, is that, I mean, it's, you know, maybe 30s doesn't sound super old, but that's like, you know, over 15 years. It was actually, I was mid 30s. So I was like, I think I was 33. So yeah, that's like almost 20 years after having a paid career as a musician. I mean, that's a whole lot of anxiety, fear, and self-criticism that stopped those songs from seeing the light of day. So I do think that it's important to sort of accept the way that the timeline goes. I mean, life is going to throw things at us, but not letting it stop you from pursuing what you love to do and what you want to say and what you want to put out, even if it's not perfect or exactly the way you want it, you know, at this time.
That's absolutely true, because we just sit on stuff for so long. Mm-hmm. And the biggest cure for that is just making more stuff.
Yes.
Because then we're not as precious about, it's hard to be precious about that one song when we've got 30 other songs or however many. And the more that I'm making music, I'm falling in love with whatever the current song is. And then I move on to the next one and I'm falling in love with that song. And that way I can put all that energy into it and all that enthusiasm and excitement, but I can also just let it go and move on to the next one and then go back and listen to the other one and go, oh, that's really good. Or I don't think I very often really, you know, have that same kind of over preciousness about it where I judge it. I don't judge it as harshly as I did when I had less of the music.
That's valid. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a valid point.
It's really nice to sort of give myself, you know, my younger self a bit more appreciation that, hey, good job. Now let's move on to the next. But I have thought about revisiting a couple of songs, and it's a nice feeling when it's this far removed, because it's just like, this song is worth being revisited. And that's a really exciting thing. And then knowing that I can do with it what I didn't have the skill to do the first time around. And so it just, becomes a really cool exercise and not so much of a critique of, oh, you did a terrible job before. It's like, I did good for what I could do. And now I can do more. And I think that that's also a healthy way to continue to grow as an artist. So
I think for me this year in 2026, that's part of what the work that I'm releasing this year reflects a bit of what you just said, because my single that I released in January, which was an ambient instrumental, it's called A Long Time Coming. And I wrote it a few years ago, around the time when I was learning music production. So I wasn't, like I didn't really know what I was doing 100% yet. So so I didn't do it then, and it didn't fit with the Calm Principles album. It was like a different thing. And the next song I'm releasing a few singles. So the next single is not a new song. It's a song I wrote when I was in college, and I reinvented it as an ambient sonic 5-minute experience thing. It started off as a piano-based singer-songwriter piece with lyrics and everything, but I took the lyrics out and I kept the melody of the top line of the singing, and I made it like a piano-based ambient production instead. And I think sometimes even that was a bold move, right? Because it could have never been released, or I could release it 20 something years later, and I think that's the moral of the story. It's that here I am at 46 releasing a song that I wrote 26 years ago. just about, maybe a little more. I'm not sure exactly which year it was. I maybe was 19 or 20, but that's really interesting, and I could have released it in my 20s. There was really nothing wrong with the demos that I had. They were lovely for the time. They were very appropriate for the time. They were piano-based, singer, they had some harmonies, but I just didn't release it. So now it needed to be reinvented, and being able to have the capacity to do that, like you said, now you have different skills. Yeah, that's been a blessing. Being able to have learned how to do music production on my own and being able to put in some work myself into those songs is 100% a blessing. I mean, but even then, it's important to also still work with other people and get their feedback and not be afraid to ask for help. I mean, even for my last single, I went back to Mark Plotty and I asked him for help. I was like, hey, I'm having an issue with this mix. I need your ears just to give it, a solid thing. And he fixed whatever was wrong with it. And, it was a quick situation. But sometimes you just need to not be afraid to admit that also, like, hey, I've got this and it's almost there, but I can't get it to where I want it to be. And I, trust someone or a few people that are willing to be a support system as colleagues. And, it makes such a big difference. And I would probably have not imagined at 15 that this is like where my music career was going to be, but I'm pretty happy with it now. Like, I think that there was a point where maybe you start to feel the imposter syndrome, like, oh, I'm an independent artist. I'm not signed, I'm getting old. I'm a mom, but all of that doesn't stop me from being an artist. So it's really the attitude. I think the mindset of it has to, it's like, yeah, you're an artist, this is what I happen to do in my personal life.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I love about that reinvention of your song is sometimes, many, many times I'll write a song on guitar because that's my primary instrument. And sometimes I'll sit down and start producing it. I'll even record a few tracks and I'm like, something's not working. And then I realize it doesn't want to be a guitar song. And so I have to make it do something else. And then it just pops into place. And so I think really that's one of the really powerful things about producing. It's not about, I only focus on this one instrument, that this is my primary thing. Instead, it's, what does this want to be? What is this? And even if it's a version, because you could do multiple versions of songs if you wanted to. And that freedom and flexibility to do that is so exciting, because then those pieces can say what they want to be and what's going to actually make them really come to life. And I just find that so much fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I work with Logic, and that's what I learned on. But I guess as a teacher, like, I've used BandLab and GarageBand as well. And every once in a while, I'll do workshops for online to just help people, like, to finish the song, like finish your song idea. Because I think I've definitely been there, especially when I was younger, before DAWs, like before I learned, digital audio productions or anything like that. You have a tendency to get stuck in the writer's block of editing yourself before you've finished the idea. And I think when you're working with technology now, you have the ability to save all of the ideas. So, if you're working on a new song, like, just, map out the song, create the space for the bar measures, put down a sound, whatever it's going to be. If you're an instrumentalist, okay, lay down whatever your chord progression or the riff you have or the idea. But to build and save and save and save and save, and then, okay, mute that because that doesn't work anymore, but we're going to loop this and listen to this a few times. And, I think that process is so different than 20 years ago, with like your little notebook and a pencil and, trying to write things out. So it's a different process, And we grow and we learn, we adapt to the things that come out. So I will say the advent of that technology of being able to do digital production empowered me to be able to release music on my own, which is something that I was very hesitant to do prior. In 2016, when I did my first album, I was in a recording studio. I had a sound engineer. Somebody else mixed it. Somebody else mastered it. All I did was write the music and show up and play the piano and sing. And then I had, my drummer, my bassist, my guitarist, all the things. And I think that's fantastic. I feel like everyone wants to have that experience of recording an album in a recording studio, and it's wonderful. However, it's also an investment on yourself. Mm-hmm. And as an independent artist, that may not be something everyone can do. So that's why I feel that learning how to do production is so important, because it's a much smaller investment. And you can learn to do these things yourself. And even if you end up needing someone to mix or master for you, you can do so much on your own to create the bones of your song, that then you feel good that you finished it, that you have something to show, a demo, give somebody the idea. Maybe somebody else can sing it for you, because maybe you don't want your vocal on it, or like you said, it's not your instrument. This belongs to a different, but at least you're able to communicate the sonic idea. And that's very cool for the modern age in music. We're very lucky, I think, in that sense, because that didn't exist, when I was younger. It wasn't an option. So
yeah, I agree. And just being able to communicate what you want to, what the sound is that you want to hear, and to know enough because of working in production that, like you said, even if you don't do any of the final production, right, you still are a producer, because you can communicate that this is what I want the engineer to accomplish. And that's a huge barrier to overcome. And it's a lot cheaper to buy an extra hard drive to keep all those ideas than it is to go into a professional studio for every track that we imagine we might want to do. And when we have to also, plot out which ones we're going to put the money toward versus just working on a simple idea, you can do that so much easier and obviously without an added investment. And so it's great to build a very large catalog. You don't have to determine which ones are going to make the cut, which is literally where that comes from. So
yeah, for sure. And I feel like a big part of when I started to do music production, which I guess was 2020. So 2020, 2021. Mind you that the first album I released was 2021. That was produced by me. And then just Mark Plotty gave it his ears just to check for mistakes, which, by the way, he would find like the weirdest things. And I was like, it would be like, I don't know, like, oh, like it sounds like the EQ. This is like before he actually looked at the project. It was like, I think like the EQ, blah, 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 like some techie thing that he responded back with. And I'm like, no, I did that. And I go and look at the track, and kid you not, it was exactly in a spot that he heard a mistake. And I was like, okay, well, I'm clearly in the wrong industry because I could not hear that, but okay. So like, baby producer, years were funny, because you can't hear certain things that someone with a lot more professional experience can hear. But as the more you do it, the more you get better at it, you grow in your skill set. And then you're bringing that not just to your own work, but you bring that on, to the table when you're working with other people too, which is so nice. Cause I think that music production is very elusive for a lot of people. I think that recording on a microphone, like if someone's never recorded themselves, it could be like a whole new world. Like it's definitely, because the mic sounds weird. You sound weird. You sound so raw. Like you're not sure if it sounds good. It's like, like monitoring is weird for people who've never done it before. So even that's a learning curve. And the more you do it, then the better you get at doing it. And same thing with recording your instrument and, recording with MIDI, making it not sound so computerized. All those things are skill sets that take time and practice. So it's almost the best way to get better at the arts is to just, like you said, keep doing more of it. And, and then you learn more, as you do it. And you also learn more from other people too. Like, when you encounter other people's work, sometimes you're like, oh, how did they do this? How did this happen? And then you're like, oh, wow, like I didn't know that you could click on this one button or something and it does this effect, or I could fix, I remember when I learned how to do corrective EQ, and I didn't even know that was a thing, but I was like, oh, would have saved me so much time if I'd known, because Because when you don't know corrective EQ, you can like there's only so many ways to mix certain things that don't sound right.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, oh, I have to re-record this. But corrective EQ can save you so much time if it's like salvageable, and even that, like someone who may be hearing this for the first time is like, corrective EQ, what's that? But it's like, find out, go learn what a corrective EQ is. It's going to be a good thing. Yeah. So I definitely think that continuing to educate yourself on the skills that, that you need as an artist, or it's not going to hurt you. It's always going to be a benefit down the line, even if it's a little challenging at first, So.
Absolutely. And every challenging thing, or I should say everything that gives us freedom to do the thing that we want to do is going to be tough to start with, but it's going to be worth it. And
for sure.
And the results are just incredible and also just so fulfilling. And I think that's why it's so clear that we just keep coming back around to our music, or it keeps coming back around to us. And that's just such a powerful, wonderful thing.
I agree. It is. I would definitely say that being a musician now, right? It's like, oh yeah, I really ended up being who I am as a person. Like I don't foresee it ever not being a part of my life now. And I'm sure a lot of other musicians feel that way. And sometimes we don't say, oh, I'm an artist, but we are. Like if you create, and you don't need to have fame and fortune in order to be an artist. Like you are an artist because you create. And that's it. And then whatever you do to grow skills is just making you a better artist, or making you a more, prolific artist, or maybe a more productive artist, but yeah, like as long as we're putting out art, from a human history standpoint, that's all that's required. You create the art and hopefully it reaches someone and touches someone and impacts them. And that's all we can ask for.
That's amazing. So how can people keep up with your music? Where can they find you on all the places?
Oh, thank you. Well, okay, so I do have a website. It's musicbyprin.com. So Prin is Prin. And I do have social media. So I have my Instagram and my Facebook and my TikTok are under Music by Prin for the handle as well. I do Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. I go live to do sound healing meditations and talk about sound healing instruments, because part of the wellness programs that I do. And then I do have some new music coming out. April 17th is my next single, Silly Questions. So you can check me out there wherever you stream your music. And yeah, hopefully this year I'll have a few singles coming out. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. Awesome. And this has been a wonderful conversation and such a powerful story. And it's not just a series of Prin's life was going great, but wait, it really is just so empowering. And I hope helps us to remember that all the things that lead to where we are now, all those parts of our stories, whatever they felt like at the time, are important to who we are now and to the art that we create. So This has been just a delight, and I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast as well. I appreciate the time.
What an incredible conversation with Prin. I hope you felt what I felt in that. This sense that sometimes the life we think is getting in the way of our music is actually the life that makes our music worth hearing. A few moments really stayed with me. Prin talked about how her mental health journey of being hospitalized, doing the hard work of getting well, wasn't a detour from her music career. It was the thing that made it possible. She said it plainly. She needed to exist in order to make music. She talked about getting hit by a car the day after her health insurance ran out, just as she'd just left her higher ed career to go all in on music. A hand injury that took years to recover from, spinal surgery, a pandemic, and then losing her brother, and writing an entire album in the month after he passed as a way to grieve. That album became the foundation of her whole brand around wellness and the arts. What I found so powerful was how Prin didn't frame any of it as a tragedy. She framed it as alignment, a path that took the shape it needed to take. And there's a story brand lens here that I want to offer you because I think it's really useful. Every one of us as artists is the hero of our own story. And heroes don't start at the finish line. They start with a problem, sometimes many, many problems. The guide in your story isn't someone who has a perfect record. The guide is someone who has been through it, who has earned wisdom from the journey, and who shows up to say, I know this road. Let me walk it with you. Prin is living proof of that, and so are you. So here's your actionable takeaway for this episode. Take 10 minutes this week and write down the moments in your artist journey that you've been tempted to hide or skip over. The detours, the setbacks, the years of silence. Because those aren't the parts of your story that undermine your credibility as an artist. They are your credibility. That's what makes someone trust you. And if you ever want to build an audience, a following, or a brand around your music, the realness of your story is the most powerful asset that you have. Don't hide the second verse. It's the best part. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to Second Verse wherever you listen. And if you have a moment, leaving a review genuinely helps other artists find this show. You can also follow Prin at Music by Prin on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And check out her website at musicbyprin.com. Her next single, Silly Questions, drops April 17th. Until then, keep chasing your second verse. Now, I'd love to close this episode with a song Prin released in January, an ambient instrumental called A Long Time Coming. She wrote it a few years back while learning music production, sat on it, and finally released it this year. Given everything you just heard about her journey, I think you'll agree. The title says everything. Here's Prin.